Welcome to Woodinville, a small community nestled in the Sammamish River Valley just 20 miles from Seattle. Here you'll discover a city enjoying steady economic growth based on a mix of light industrial, retail, and tourism. Home to more than 40 wineries, Woodinville is considered by many to be the center of the Northwest wine industry. Its distinctive character is brought to life as a unique winery destination that highlights wines grown from grapes in eastern Washington. Woodinville is also known for its unique businesses, which include Red Hook Brewery, the world-renowned Herb Farm Restaurant, Molbach's Nursery and Greenhouse. Woodinville is not only a tourist destination, it's home to a variety of other nationally and regionally known companies such as Precor, one of the world's leading fitness equipment manufacturers, Loud Technologies, one of the world's largest dedicated professional audio and music products companies, and Molbach's,
To address high levels of fecal coliform in lakes and creeks in King County, in 2009, the Lakes and Streams Group began looking at lab methods to differentiate general animal-based fecal coliform contamination from human-specific contamination.
Hi, I'm Doug Rice, co-host of the King County TV show Yard Talk. Did you know that there are approximately 200 tons of pet waste deposited in the Puget Sound region every day? A good portion of this gets left on the ground and washes into storm drains, streams, and eventually into Puget Sound. This creates serious problems for both our water quality and for the other life in our waters. One of the best ways of keeping stormwater clean is to pick up all your pet waste and dispose of it properly, bagged and in your trash. Nowadays, many people are good at picking up their pet waste from the sidewalk, but forget about it in the backyard. Remember, pet waste is still raw sewage and has a lot of bad bacteria that persists on a site, where it can contaminate stormwater as well as families.
When I call your name, please come to the microphone, state your name, whether or not you live in the city limits, and you will have 3 minutes. Ryan McInster.
Good evening, Mayor Arndt and council members. Ryan McInster. I'm the advocacy manager for the Master Builders of King and Snohomish County. Unfortunately, I don't live in Woodinville. I live in Seattle, but I love coming over here to visit. This is my first time in front of you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. We represent about 2,500 members, a number of them that build in this community. That also represents about over 10,000 employees and their families. We appreciate the decision of scaling the fee of the square footage rather than by bedroom count. We know it's easier to implement for staff as well as us. There's not a conversation about what's a bedroom, what's not. We really appreciate you considering that as a way to scale that tiered system. Between the two rate options in front of you tonight, of course, you can understand where we would probably be coming from supporting option A. Even under option A, the fee of a typical Woodinville home rises from $3,100 approximately to about $3,900, and homes over 2,300 square feet nearly double. Option B adds another $1,500 approximately on top of that. Using the National Association of Home Builders' own research in an annual report, the difference alone prices out roughly 1,500 families in the region. We understand the urgency behind adopting the new rates quickly, and we understand your need to move quickly today to second reading. We appreciate you considering our support of option A. Thank you.
Thank you. Bobby Amiri.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and dear council members. My name is Bobby Amiri, and I live within the city limit of Woodinville. For more than 2 years, I have come before this council asking the city to modernize its private road standards so homeowners on a private street can make use of their underutilized property by adding modest infill housing. This issue has moved between council, planning commission, and city staff. Yet the public has received little information about its current status. Homeowners who will be directly affected deserve clear information about what is being considered and when proposed changes will come before you. What the staff shared so far is concerning. Woodinville older private roads were built with 20-foot easement limited to serving up to 4 homes. Under the approach staff shared last year, private road serving more than 2 homes would need at least 26 or 28 feet of paved roadway. That standard would make it impossible for existing roads to support any additional subdivision or even add ADU to existing lots. And instead of reducing barriers, it creates new ones. This approach is inconsistent with the city stated housing goals. It conflicts with the Department of Commerce guidance encouraging middle housing infill. It exceeds the access standard recommended by International Fire Code. And it is inconsistent with solution implemented by our neighboring cities. Woodinville homeowners deserve transparency and representation on issues that affect their property rights and economic interest. So, tonight, I'm asking the council to direct staff to provide a public update on the status of these revisions. Clearly explain how existing homeowners will be affected and outline a timeline for public review and council action. The public deserve the opportunity to evaluate and comment before any standards are finalized. Thank you always for your, and I appreciate it, everything that you allow me to speak here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amiri. I believe that will be coming to council in September at one of our meetings.
I appreciate that, and that's what I'm asking, because this is part of affordability housing as well. Imagine that it will help my children. An example, I'm one person. My children, as well as my grandchildren, they will have a housing because I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm here with you, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much for letting me know. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you. That is everyone we have signed up for this evening in this part of public comment.
All right. Move to accept the consent calendar as written.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comment? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, consent calendar passes unanimously. And we're moving on to our first business item this evening, and that is the appointment to fill position 1 on the Public Spaces Commission. Sorry, do we have a slide for that? I'm waiting. We can proceed. If not, that's fine. Thank you. This appointment this evening for position 1, we have one applicant. And as typical for our process, we will ask the applicant to come forward, and we will go down the line of council, and each council member has the opportunity to ask one question, and the applicant can respond. And then afterwards, we will make nominations in line with the process that we have set out in our code. So it'll be very straightforward this evening since we only have one applicant for the position, but I'm going to invite Mary, and it's Karskaden. Please correct me.
It rhymes with Madden. We pronounce it Karskaden.
Karskaden.
The way it's spelled will confuse you. Just try to remember Madden. I think he played for some football team. When I was a teacher, I would tell my students that all the boys remembered quickly. Is this where you would like me to say?
Please sit, yes.
Karskaden.
Karskaden. Thank you. So, Ms. Karskaden, thank you. We'll start with Councilmember Evans, and we will proceed with questioning this evening. Thank you so much for your application to join the Public Spaces Commission. We appreciate all the community members who take the time to apply and come before council for this.
Great, thank you, and welcome in tonight. My question is, please describe what you believe to be the role of a planning commissioner and what you'd like to accomplish during your term as planning commissioner. Or, sorry, public spaces. Public spaces, this is an old one. No, thank you. As on public spaces, please describe your role on public spaces as you understand it and what you'd like to accomplish.
As far as what I understand, I would be part of the council or commission. And I would like to accomplish help on that council, on that commission, excuse me. In my essays that I answered, I said I might be the oldest person on that commission, and perhaps I could be the voice of my generation as far as public spaces. The only former experience I've had was in a very small town in Oregon called Sublimity, Oregon. And it was about as big as its name, just tiny. So I have had some experience. I've been a member, I've lived in Woodinville for almost 6 years now. And I think I just have observed Woodinville through the eyes of an 89-year-old person. So I hope I can bring perhaps that aspect to the commission. Is that an answer that would suffice?
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Thank you. My question's partially been answered, but you can expand on this. Can you tell us a little bit about how your personal or professional background has prepared you to be an effective public spaces commissioner?
Personal?
Personal or professional, either way.
Well, just personal as far as living here and observing what the open spaces are that are provided right now. Professional, I don't know that I can say I have a professional background. I'm going to rely on my life experiences and my life skills to perhaps help me filter whatever information I hear that is presented to the commission. Should I go on? Oh. Is there any more I should add? 6 years, I ought to have done quite a bit of observing. I guess that's it. And my admiration for Woodinville and what it has provided. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, which rather prides itself on some street art. But in comparison, I have never seen a city that does a better job than Woodinville as far as street art. I'll tell you, Sublimity, Oregon is way behind in that. So I would just say that what the Public Spaces Commission has done or helped achieve seems to be very on target and productive and progressive. I'd like to be part of that because I wanted to volunteer and this job just kind of fell into my lap. And I thought, how wonderful, because of all the places around Woodinville, I'm very fond of the open spaces, especially. And I want to thank publicly LaMarcus for helping me make it to this table tonight. And you can help me with the pronunciation of his last name. Gilliard? Gilliard?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Was he a football player? Any one of those last names? Nothing I can remember. Okay. All right. Thank you, Council Member.
Deputy Mayor.
Ms. Caston, thanks you so much for volunteering to spend your time and energy with our Public Spaces Commission. My question for you, since you have lived through all the age ranges, and I can say that's an addition just for you, what opportunities for our open spaces do you see for all age ranges here in Woodinville?
What opportunities? Mm-hmm. Well, as you may know, when I came in, I used a walker. I brought a cane with me so that I can navigate. I would think that I will especially be observing what is done that could be useful to the elderly, because I happen to be one. I don't just play one on TV. I really am one, so that I can. Recently, I wrote a poem before I knew about those new benches that are going to the railroad flats. I like that picture of those benches. Anyway, my poem said there are lanes for the bicycles and things like that, but what about the people with canes? And where can they sit? I absolutely yearn for places to sit when I'm walking around Woodinville. The Wooden Creek apartments have a very nice bunch of places to sit. And I love those front and back benches that are along as you go towards the Bronze Bunnies. I'm not good on streets, but I'm great on landmarks. So I like those front and back benches. Do you know the ones I mean? That one faces the street and one faces the building, and you can talk. I understand that you do not want to provide benches that are going to, and this may be a sore spot, but to provide places for homeless and vagrants to camp on. Yes, no? Comment? Nothing? You don't have that problem here yet, do you? You don't. But if we could just have small benches for people to sit on, just more benches. Maybe I haven't walked enough to see where there's a plethora of benches, but coming from my aspect, my perspective. Woodinville needs benches. My poem was entitled, Woodinville, a good place to settle down, with a double meaning there. It's a great place to move into, but it would be a great place to be able to sit down and settle down once in a while. I'll bring my poem and read it to you. So now that I've gone way off into the weeds answering your question, please tell me again, what should I have said in the first place?
I think you have ventured into it, and we can definitely pursue this conversation if you become a member of that open spaces spot.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will yield my question at this time and move on to Councilmember Wise.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I feel like you've touched on this a few times, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to just answer directly. What was it that inspired you to apply for this position?
One evening, I thought, I'd like to see if I can do some volunteer work. And I thought, I don't even know where to begin. My daughter and her friends who are facing retirement are doing that now. They are starting to look for places and opportunities to volunteer so that they won't just look at their retirement and go, I don't know what I'm going to do. So they're already busy. So I thought, well, how do you volunteer? So I thought, I'll call City Hall and I'll just say, I'd like to volunteer. I live across the street from you. It's pretty easy for me to get over here. Is there something I could do? And the woman that picked up the phone said, let me put you through to Lamarcus. And I said, okie doke. And then Lamarcus came on and I said, I'm just looking for something to do. And he said, well, we just happen to have a position open. Would you like to apply for it? And I said, of course I would. And what is it for? And he said, the Open Spaces, Public Spaces Commission. And I said, that's perfect. That's what I want. And then he helped me get the paperwork and just said, fill this out. No one else has applied. He said, you know, they might let you have the job. And I said, okay, let's go. And that's why I'm here. I'd like to be useful and see what a commission person does. They're not a council person, correct? They're a commission.
You are correct.
Okay. Do they meet in this room?
They do.
All right. Did I answer your question?
You sure did. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Councilmember Millman.
Hi. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to tell you that we appreciate your willingness to volunteer for the city, and I appreciate your perspective that you would bring to this Open Public Spaces Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is the end of the questioning process. We've gone down the line. Now, I will read this out so that we are trying to be very consistent on council so that we do this the same way each time. And so I'm going to actually read the verbiage, even though it might seem a bit excessive. So for this position, nominations will be made from the floor, and council members need not be recognized by the presiding officer to make a nomination. No second is required, and the vote will be taken for position 1. Any questions? No. Nominations are now in order for position 1. Are there any nominations?
I move to nominate Ms. Caston.
Seeing no further nominations, last and final time, we're calling for nominations. Seeing and hearing none, nominations are now closed. So this is an open election. Given that we have one candidate here this evening, we will go down, Madam Clerk will go down the roll, and you can cast your vote accordingly.
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Wise?
Yes.
Councilmember Millman,
Yes.
Mayor Arndt,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Randolph.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Well, thank
You have now been appointed to position 1 on the Public Spaces Commission, and we are very excited to have you spending more time here in City Hall. You'll get an opportunity to sit behind this desk at the next Public Spaces meeting. So
And it's
thank you.
the last Thursday of every month.
Yes.
I know that much. Thank
Yes.
you very much, all of you. I will do my very best to help them do their good work. I'm sure they do. I would be glad to meet them.
It's not them anymore, it's us now. You're one of them.
That's so true. I are one. Thank you all.
All right. As we transition, we will move into business item 11. This is the public hearing and first reading of ordinance number 812.
I move to open public hearing and receive public testimony on ordinance number 812, amending the emissions tax.
Second.
Motion and second. Any comment? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes and the public hearing is now open. We will take our presentation first and then any public testimony.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. I have for you a brief presentation on ordinance number 812. It removes an exemption from the tourist industrial zone and tourist business zone for the admissions tax, and it expands the authorized uses of revenues. So by way of background, Council discussed this topic on July 7th of this year. Staff proposed removing the TI and TB exemption to provide funding for parks, both the capital infrastructure and for operating and maintenance costs. The discussion included a recommendation that we notify affected businesses of the potential change, provide a public hearing for their input, which is where we are tonight. And then we prepared a draft ordinance based upon the input provided by council at that meeting. Notifications, just for your own information, we sent 214 notifications out via the U.S. Post Office to all the licensed businesses within the TI-TB zones. We sent it both to their physical location and mailing address to make sure that the message was received. Just for everybody's edification, admissions tax was implemented in 1998, about the time the movie theater was being opened in the city of Woodinville. I know because I was actually managing movie theaters and helped open that theater back then, those days. It is a 5% tax on admissions. So in the case of the movie theater, it pays 5% on all ticket sales to the city. Amongst other taxpayers throughout the city that have to pay admissions tax. The city currently restricts the revenue for parks and recreation purposes, both operations and maintenance and capital improvements that's established in the current code. Admissions tax applies to admissions charges, season tickets, season subscriptions, cover charges, charges made for food and refreshment where free entertainment and recreation or amusement is provided. Rental equipment or facilities for the purpose of recreation or amusement if that equipment or facilities is necessary for the enjoyment of the privilege for which general admission has already been charged. And automobile parking charges if the charges are based upon the number of occupants in the vehicle when they're parking and required donations. Those are all stipulated in the current code. The current exemption zones are shown here in this map. It's the tourist business zone and the tourist industrial zones. And that exemption has existed for the last 28 years. Council has...
Sorry, we have a question.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Millman?
Yeah, just a quick question. Those are only 2 districts where there's been granted exemption?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Council addressed the question of an exemption when the tax was put in place back in 1998, and then revisited the topic 10 years later. Both times Council decided to implement and then keep the exemption in place to support the Woodinville's early tourism economy, wineries, tasting rooms, and special event venues. Why reconsider the exemption now? There's several reasons. Significant growth in the tourism-oriented businesses since the adoption of the exemption, 28 years ago. So that market has matured at least a little bit. The city has shifted some of its priorities. There's more demands on park funding. And we've increased the number of facilities, the number of programs we're offering, so level of service has increased. So the costs, it's not just inflation that we're incurring, it's also an increase due to demand from our citizens in terms of facilities and different amenities provided to our beautiful city. In addition, there's been some contemplation of additional services regarding transit and parking, and how monies might be focused on solving some of those issues related to the tourism industry within the city of Woodinville. And then finally, all of the businesses outside of those zones have been paying this tax for 28 years. So by removing the exemption, it provides equitability treatment across the city. So it addresses that issue. Financially, here's kind of the reason staff brought this to council for consideration. Just in fiscal year 2025, rental fees for the sports field, both lighting and the use of the field, came to roughly $300,000. Admissions tax collected another $266,000. So our total revenues is $567,000. Our operating expenditures are $1.2 million. So we have a funding gap of $634,000. That's supported by the general fund. Those costs have been growing year over year faster than the general fund revenues have been growing, almost by double. And with this particular spending, there's no plan for infrastructure replacement as our current infrastructure ages, and there's no real plan for future demands as things like the East Rail Linear Park opens up. That's going to add additional level of service costs and so on. I do want to make sure everybody is aware that when we originally issued the staff report and posted that online, it had an implementation that was within 5 days of approval of the ordinance. That was an error. It was never intended to be published that way. So we corrected and published an updated staff report and ordinance on July 31st. And the proposed ordinance does have an effective date of January 1, 2027 to allow sufficient time for affected businesses to change their processes and make sure they can comply with the new tax. The ordinance itself removes the exclusion of the TI and TB zones from the definition of place, effectively eliminating the admissions tax exemption for those 2 zones. It expands the allowable use of tax revenues to include transit and parking to support tourism. And again, it establishes an effective date of January 1, 2027. And staff is available to answer any questions, after which we recommend receiving public testimony. And then if the council wishes, they can close the public hearing or continue it.
Thank you. Questions for staff? Councilmember.
Thank you. I didn't realize the parking was based on how many people were in the car. So when you go to a concert at Chateau Saint Michel, it's a flat fee of $50 or $80 depending on where you park. We're not taxing that.
Correct. The parking, if the parking fee is just based a flat fee per vehicle, it would not be subject to this tax.
Where in Woodinville would we be charging based on how many people are in the car? That seems like a strange code.
I did a review of other codes throughout the Puget Sound region. That definition is just very common across all of the definitions of admission type activity. And so it's basically drawn from that, I would imagine.
Not in Woodinville, but I think an example that I could think of, not that there's much of it around, but you think of like the drive-in movies where they're coming in and paying by the car, by the number of people in the car.
At a drive-in movie?
We're
going back to 1980. Thank you. I was confused about that because it seems like kind of a miss for the code when that's not a common practice here in Woodinville.
Other questions for staff members? All right, I think we will take public testimony at this point. Thank you. Same process as before. When I call your name, please come to the microphone, state your name, and whether you live or work in the city limits. You will have 5 minutes for the public hearing. So we'll start with Tom Versillo.
So I'm Tom Versillo. I'm general counsel for Chateau Saint Michel. I'm here today to urge the council to reject this proposal for 2 reasons, really. First, based on our expertise in running our business, we firmly believe that this will decrease tourism substantially to Chateau Saint Michel and in turn Woodinville in general. And second, it really does risk our ability as a business to further develop and maintain the Chateau Saint Michel property as the stewards for that community asset. As you know, we're under family ownership now. It's the first time we've had local ownership in 50 plus years, the entirety of our operations in Woodinville. And the Wyckoff family is invested in this community. They've made attempts to partner with the city, holding several meetings regarding expending capital to improve Chateau Saint Michel and maintain it as a world-class asset. And it's with that context and attempt to forge partnership that we were disappointed and surprised when we saw this proposal. When I look at the economics of the proposal, it's interesting to me because it's written as facially neutral. The actual effect of the proposal, though, derives essentially all of its revenue off a single business's operations, and that's Chateau Saint Michel's concert series. It's based on the council's, the finance department's math. It would be roughly, I believe, 90% would be derived from our concert ticket revenue. Single source taxes like that, in my experience, near single source, extraordinarily uncommon, and there's a reason for that. It's just not typical. We weren't consulted about the proposal in advance, and we don't believe the city has full information on the actual impact it would have on our business and downstream to other tourism-based businesses. We believe those would both be negative, and we actually believe that when you look at the downstream visitation we drive, there's a good potential that this ends up being revenue neutral or negative to the city just based on sales taxes and occupancy taxes decreasing from decreased concert demand. When you look at this tax, it's really focused on live entertainment. That's where it's going to drive the majority of its revenue. And that's a very challenged industry right now. Costs are up. Tours are either being canceled or postponed. Demand is not elastic. At the same time, we're facing a level of competition for our venue that we've never really faced before. At the time this tax was first implemented, we were really the only venue of our size, outdoors, summer-based, in the region. That's not the case anymore. At this point, we face competition from new venues at Remlinger Farms, an expanded venue down in Marymore, and a new venue down in Tacoma at Point Defiance, just to name a few examples that are pulling the same artists as us. The economic effects of this are very real, and we felt them over the last few years. So the peak of our concert series was 2023, before this level of competition really amped up regionally. At that point, we had 41 shows booked. This year, despite wanting to maintain that same level, we're down to 25. That's a decrease in 40% in our business, just based from regional competition. The other thing I would like the council to understand is the concert business is essential to Chateau Ste. Michelle's position in Woodinville. This tax, very well, if implemented, could have a substantial impact on our ability to further develop and maintain that property as a world-class venue. Our ownership is committed to ensuring that CSM is a world-class asset that maintains its character in a way previous ownership didn't want to do, and also maintains its position as a beloved community asset. Our concert series doesn't make a lot of money, and in order to achieve that, we really need that business to thrive. It's the engine that drives people to Ste. Michelle that makes it possible to maintain that property in the heart of Woodinville. So I'm respectfully urging the council to reject this proposal. I don't believe it will meet the city's aims, and I believe if we're going to move forward, there needs to be a greater degree of partnership to determine the actual impacts on our business and other businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. John Evans.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Again, my name is John Evans, and I'm a resident here of Woodinville. I'm also the general manager of the Somme Hotel and Spa here. And tonight I'm representing the Woodinville Hotel Partners to talk about this initiative. The Woodinville Hotel Partners, they are the obvious owners of the Somme Hotel. And while WHP does not oppose the city broadening the revenue base, as we recognize the council's obligation to fund the city's services and capital needs, we are, however, unable to make a final position on the amendment as noticed because two threshold matters remain unresolved. The scope of the city intends to, what the city intends to tax and the purpose to which the resulting revenue will be appointed. And WHP could support the removal of the T1, T9 exemption if and only if the taxable event is defined with sufficient precision that affected businesses can model the impact and comply with confidence and remove the derived from the tourist district in a dedicated ordinance way. A couple of questions that we'd like to ask. So what is the definition of the admission-based event? The notice states that the amendment would require admission-based events in our areas to collect and rent the city's 5% admission tax. The term admission-based event does not appear in WMC Chapter 3.10 and is not defined in the notice. The second question, Woodinville Hotel Partners takes the position that the funds generated by admission charges within the tourism district should be appropriated to the organization's assets and or services that benefit the tourism district. For example, direct destination, marketing, event planning, execution, district programming, wayfinding, visitor transportation, and that such appropriation should be governed by public rules regarding application to the use of those funds. There's two considerations to support dedicating these funds to the tourist district. One is just that the businesses that would newly bear this tax are the same businesses that create the visitor demand the city seeks to cultivate. Revenue drawn from admission to the tourist district is most defensively and reinvested in the demand penetration, programming, and infrastructure that sustain those admissions, which in turn grows the lodging sales and admissions tax base over time. The precedent and process. The city already administers a comparable framework for visitor-derived revenue through its lodging tax and lodging tax advisory committee, including a published application and award process for tourism promotion. A parallel structure, designated fund, enumerated eligible uses, an application and award cycle, and input from the businesses paying the tax would give the proposal transparency and accountability that a general purpose deposit cannot. What we'd like to see is those funds be directed towards more tourism. We see there's a shortfall in the dollars that we have here in the community as it is. We see that there's just tremendous amount of potential in this community to generate additional tourism, thus generating additional tax dollars within our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have Marla Vasilantos.
I'm Marla Vasilantos. I have been sober for 12 years. No, just kidding. I didn't have a plan to talk tonight, so I'm just going to spill my guts a little bit. I've lived in Woodinville over 25 years. I've seen the magnificent changes and all the hard work that people like yourselves put into it, as well as the business owners and community support staff, even like our new friend serving on the public space. All this effort is creating such a beautiful place, and I'm so thrilled to live here. I currently live and participate in the new tourist district, and I love that, and I'm very excited for all the small businesses that are working so hard to create this great place that people can enjoy. I'm very concerned about the cost to not only establish a business, but to thrive and to pay the taxes for the benefit, if you have profits, et cetera, that go into the coffers of the tax revenue. And I'm concerned that these businesses are starting out, and I don't even know if we know how much tax revenue we'll be able to generate from those businesses. And once you do that, you're likely going to have a lot more revenue that you can participate and expend towards the items that you're talking about. I just want to really emphasize how hard it is for those folks to get going, and hope that we don't make it even harder on them. And I would argue that our friend at Chateau Saint Michel, that it's not only the competition that you talked about, but there's a lot of beautiful free concerts put on by cities and wonderful music, et cetera, that is also competing, that is part of the experience. Sometimes it's free, sometimes it's not free to the consumer. So if you're not making a profit, you can't afford to be in business, and so you have to raise your prices. And people like you and I that want to enjoy our community, it just ends up making everything even more expensive. So I would just say give it a little time, at least for these places to get established, to see what kind of revenue you'll be able to bring in, and perhaps you can fund those things that you are in need of or speak of that can possibly be coming from the great, hopefully, success of these businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. That is everyone we have signed up for the public hearing this evening.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Do we have further questions for staff members at this time? I think I do have a question, I think, for the city attorney based on some of the comments from our public and that council received in writing just about the definitions of taxable event. And I was hoping, Mr. Ganson, that you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. First of all, just to be clear, that term taxable event doesn't appear in the ordinance. In the existing code, and it's not part of the revisions. That was terminology used in the public hearing notice, as I understand it. The actual defined term in the ordinance, admission charge, is directly copied from the statute, which is why it includes that provision about automobile charges based on the number of occupants. That's all straight out of the statute that authorizes this tax. So I would not recommend departing from that statutory language. The city has adopted that same statutory language in its code with some minor qualifications in regard to establishments that may be charging for food and for admission. But no serious departures from the statute that authorizes this tax. What I would say is that definition in the statute and used in your admissions tax code provision is not ambiguous. It has not been the subject of significant litigation across Washington state, either under that state statute authorizing cities to impose the admissions tax or the analogous statute that authorizes counties to impose the admissions tax. So you have literally hundreds of jurisdictions throughout Washington applying the same tax, applying the same definition of an admission charge, and it isn't ambiguous.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that is quite helpful. And then just for the finance director, Mr. Fritz, so the proposed ordinance, just clarification for everyone in the room, the only changes in the ordinance are the removal of the exemption, which has been in place for the lifetime of the ordinance, and additional allowable uses for the funding to support transportation and parking related to tourism. Everything else is the same as it's been for the last 20-some odd years.
28 years, and just to clarify, it would be transit and parking,
transit.
Not transportation and parking. The transportation would be a little bit broader in terms of definition. So it was trying to keep the definition narrow, and that would be to support tourism services within the city.
Okay, thank you. We'll go with Councilmember Evans.
This might be for you, Mr. Ganson, or you, Mr. City Manager, Mr. Finance Director. Can you speak to the difference between the legislation that governs and allows LTAC versus this statute, and why those are different with committee appointments and all that?
Mr. Ganson,
I don't have any, I guess I don't have a lot of insight into the political distinctions the legislature has drawn in authorizing the lodging tax and the admission tax, and sort of closely constraining how lodging tax revenues can be used, and providing that detailed process around having a committee that recommends uses of those revenues versus the admissions tax, which comes with no statutory constraints on its use whatsoever. That's a political decision the legislature made.
I wasn't asking you to weigh in on the political, just that there is a distinction. LTAC has this written into the law, whereas the admission tax does not.
Right, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Thank you. I think you talked a little bit about this last time, so it's a two-part question. Can you talk a little bit about the purpose of the exemption when it was first created, the historical context of why at the time it may have been helpful, and why that was included specifically back then? And also, in terms of now, in terms of the business could be impacted and currently have been paying the tax, Do we know how many businesses around are already have been being charged this tax, and they're participating in this already?
The latter question, I do have the number of businesses in my records, but I wasn't prepared to answer that question now. There aren't a large number of businesses that have that tax imposed on them in the city limits. The vast majority of them would be the movie theater, and then some of the wineries and distilleries up in the North Industrial District that have put on events where they charge a covered charge for those events, and so on. In terms of the history behind it, it really is what I said during the presentation today, even though that was fairly brief. When the tax was originally presented, the intention initially was to impose it citywide, and then advocates from the tourism area, specifically St. Michel, came to council and advocated for some relief in terms of that tax. You know, a lot of the reasons they were given, really what it drummed down to was making sure that the tax didn't adversely impact the ability to support the tourism market at that time, in how robust it was. At that time, the St. Michel, based upon my understanding, was putting on about 12 concerts a year. And they indicated in their testimony that the tax makes them less competitive in terms of finding talent, because some artists will avoid venues with the tax if they can. So it was solely to help to support that industry as it matured, is at least what council stated when they decided to place it in the exemption in place.
Thank you, that was all helpful. Appreciate it.
Other questions or comments?
With that, move to pass first reading of ordinance number 812 relating to admissions tax, amending chapter 3.10 of the Woodinville Municipal Code, and ordinance number 177 and 737 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Maker of the motion, would you care to speak?
Only briefly. One of the things that I believe I'm hearing from our partners at St. Michel is that we may limit them by adding this tax. And we're not adding this tax. This is them joining the group of everyone who currently has this tax. And we celebrate your success of going from 12 up to 20. And I have seen some of the acts that come there. The St. Michel venue is a fantastic place, and I believe it will continue to be a fantastic place. And I wouldn't say that it's comparable for other places that are not St. Michel. It's that venue itself has its own placement and its own power. One of the things that we've heard quite often as council is about when those venues take place, whether it's a noise ordinance, which we can't change, whether it's traffic, which we can, and whether it's transport and other things that are surrounding that area, whether it's parking or traffic. And those are the things that we plan to actually use this funding for. So in a large degree, we're just changing over from making sure that this is a public issue where we spend the money to fix the road so people can get to the venue, where we're getting a contribution to some of those actions. And I know that it's meant to go to parks, but we're looking to actually change this so we can make sure that that venue and everything that happens out there is a better experience for people who come to Woodinville for tourism. And that's my take, but I know we still have to take a vote. So I'm hoping that's the direction that I'm leaning in. And I'll shut up and take us to a vote.
Well, Councilmember Millman.
Yeah, I've lived in Woodinville a long time, and we've driven a lot of tourism and visitors, particularly into the Hollywood Schoolhouse area, the TB and the TI. And that's kind of slowed down for my wife and I over the last few years. And a lot of it's because of the parking. You know, we just had, that area has kind of grown up from what it used to be to a lot of wine tasting and higher trafficked areas, that more intensive parking areas where people come visit and do wine tasting for 2-3 hours or longer and go to different ones. And the parking there has been a challenge with the way it's grown up. So I think that has been a deterrent to that area for tourism. And I know that as the concerts have grown, it's put a strain on the county ball field parking there, and then that lot, there used to be the empty lot there where people used to park, and that's a strain. And I know that some of the venues and restaurants all up and down the area have struggled with parking. And I know they've done some improvements over there by the Hollywood Schoolhouse, but more are needed for that area. And I get constant complaints from people wanting to go to the ball fields or utilize the trail quite a bit. So I'm mostly looking forward to the city being able to improve the parking over there, which I do expect will have a significant improvement on the number of people that come to the area and patronize the businesses in that location, because the expansion in that area from what it used to be to more tourism intensive, more traffic intensive, and more parking intensive has been a real challenge for the city. So I think improving the parking there will encourage people to come from out of the area, because there's very few people that come to the concerts or wine tasting by transit. They come by cars and they need a place to park. And we hear from people that we used to draw to that area that they can never find parking. So that is one thing that I hope that we as a city can improve in that area, and which I think will have a benefit to everybody in that area.
Councilmember Edwards.
Thank you. A word I'm hearing a lot is the word partner. It's because tourism industry here is one of the key partners to make sure that the city's a success. Without that, the city would never be able to reach the levels that we have, and it's important that we remember that always. And when it comes down to where these funds would be allocated, as currently written, there are many different areas that it can go to. Regardless of if that money does go to a larger pot for different kinds of things, I think as a council, we need to remain committed to doing what we can to help build out that tourism and entertainment industry as well. We need to be able to allocate resources and create creative partnerships in order to continue that growing, because we've got to where we are, but it doesn't stop here. The industry keeps changing, and we need to do what we can to keep supporting the growth, because in the end, that benefits the people who live here, the businesses, the city. They all need to work together because of how important that industry is to our community here. So I just want to highlight that regardless of where the money goes, if this is passed, we do need to maintain our commitment of supporting tourism and supporting specifically the tourism within our community here. Thank you.
I will just say that I know that as the City Council, we are always very cognizant of the fact that we depend on businesses. We depend on our tourism industry. And we have some really large partners down in the tourist area of the city. And I think my other council members have done a great job of talking about some of the impacts that the growth in the tourism industry has had on our community. And it's not just residents that are talking to us about the difficulty of finding parking, but it's the businesses themselves who are down on that area of the city who are struggling with getting individuals into their business, whether it's a restaurant or a tasting room or a hotel looking for staff, because of the difficulty of access to that area of the city. And I think one of the things that we are looking to do as council by closing this tax loophole is to generate some additional revenue to help solve some of those issues. So that, as Councilmember Edwards says, it is a partnership. We have been partnering with our tourism industry since the beginning of the city, and I think that is evident in the fact that this exemption existed in the first place. We have been partnering for the last 28 years in creating an opportunity for these businesses to grow in our tourism industry to become what it is today, and that partnership is evolving. It needs to evolve to serve not only that tourism industry, but the residents of our city who are seeing impacts on their day-to-day lives. And so we as a city are using this tool to help meet that need at this moment. And any further comment? All right, seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Wise?
Yes.
Councilmember Millman?
Yes.
Mayor Arndt?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, business item 12, first reading, waive second reading, and adopt ordinance number 811 regarding park impact fees.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Just waiting for my PowerPoint here to come on up. All right, as mentioned, this is a first reading, waiving of second, and recommendation to adopt ordinance 811, updating our park impact fees. So just kind of a quick reminder, impact fees in general are authorized to be collected from new development to help partially fund capital projects that add capacity, and that can be for things like parks, transportation, and schools. In 2023, the state legislature passed SB 5258 as part of a series of housing legislation requiring impact fees to be based on a proportional impact. So where previously we used to just have one impact fee we would charge for all dwelling units, we're now required to figure out a proportionality that's either based like on trips or based on bedrooms or based on square footage. So as a result of us being out of compliance with the new legislation, the city suspended collecting park impact fees, except for those projects that were covered by a development agreement because they're subject to the terms of the development agreement rather than the ordinance. We did do a calculation, and so far to date, the number of permits that we've issued for new residential developments that covered by development agreements has resulted in about $44,450 lost in park impact fee revenues. Which is one of the reasons why the recommendation for the waiving of the second reading and adoption. The city contracted with FCS Group to help us update the park impact fees, and they did their presentation to the council and gave you their findings at the July 7th meeting. So just a quick summary of the ordinance. Because the legislation had really actually made a lot of significant changes, and then just also some of the outdated stuff, it's being recommended instead of just trying to mark up the entire current ordinance, it's just to repeal and readopt the chapter, so it's all nice and clean and easy to follow. And so what it would do, it would apply park impact fees to building permits when you're constructing new residential dwelling units. So there was a little bit of a change from the presentation that FCS had given at the July 7th meeting. At that meeting, this is option A. They had proposed the fees at this tiered schedule per the council's suggestion or recommendation to staff, but they had based it on different information, and so it was this, at the bottom end was $1,645 for 0 to, and they actually originally had proposed 1,299 square feet. It's being recommended in its ordinance to actually increase that to 1,500, and I kind of explained that in the staff report. The second tier then would be basically what an average size house would have it assessed at, which is $3,911. That follows the 1,501 to 2,299, and then 2,300 and over would be $6,178. dollars per dwelling unit. Now, when they finished putting the report together, because at that time they basically just had put the initial analysis together, they hadn't finished doing the I's and T's in the report. So subsequent to that meeting, they finished and completed the report, which is attached to the ordinance in your packet. They did find that they made some errors in the calculations. And so if council wishes, you can actually charge a higher fee than was originally proposed on the July 7th meeting. That's option B here. And you can see the numbers up here that proposed. $2,054 for the first tier, $4,886 for the second tier, and $7,718 for the third tier. And before I go to the next slide, I'm going to pause for a moment and just see if there's any questions or any confusion about what I was just talking about.
I have Councilmember Edwards, please.
No, I was just going to ask for a more detailed explanation. I'm trying to understand what got us from these numbers to those, option A to option B, and like how that is impacted, how those are recalculated, I guess.
Yeah, so what they indicated to us was that the level of service calculations that they had in the original report was off. And so when they made corrections for that, that had a major impact. And then the other piece of it was that when council decided not to extend it to the non-residential projects, then that can be recaptured in the dwelling unit piece. So those combined are what affected and increased the number. And again, this is just the maximum. The council can adopt any number at this maximum or down below, but these would be the maximums that you could adopt.
And my question was about the non-residential piece of that option B. So basically, since council said that we did not want to put the fees on non-residential units, that then we can capture that money and it goes into the option B fee structure. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Yeah. So because you're narrowing down where we're collecting the money from. So it's still the same amount of money, right? That we can collect, but it's from fewer because it's not including the commercial.
Thank you. That was my clarification. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, that clarification, is that currently reflected in option B?
Yes, option B is with all of these changes and corrections being made. Yeah.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, these are the maximum numbers that the council could adopt with the methodology that's being used. All right, the rest of this just is highlighting some other things. We made some updates on exemptions. Part of it, the list of uses in there that are exempt is still basically the same. That didn't change, but we used updated to reflect the current zoning regulations. We did recommend a change, accessory dwelling units, which currently we fully exempt based per what state law allows for. We're recommending a 50% allowance for those. And then under the affordable housing, which was something we talked a little bit about, we are recommending to delete the 100% exemption because this is the one that basically requires council to put money in the budget to backfill the exemption. As far as I'm aware, we've never done that, and so nobody's ever been able to take advantage of it. In the legislation, though, the state legislature did add a new exemption that you could have for affordable housing where there is no backfilling, but that only covers an 80%, but that's been added in there. So if somebody, affordable housing, wants to take advantage of this, there would not be any requirement for council to backfill it in the budget. We also added a fee for new residential addition. This is basically only applying when an addition would move you into another tier. So, for example, if you're already at the maximum tier and you add onto your house, there's not additional fees. It's only based on if you're going from one tier to a higher tier, and that's to prevent some of the tricks that sometimes we see developers play on us sometimes to try to avoid fees. And I would also note that the fee that you would pay, it wouldn't be the entire next tier. What it would be is the difference between the higher tier and the existing tier. So it's just basically based on what would be considered their impacts by moving into the higher tiers that you would pay for. The legislature in those updates also changed. It used to be 6 years you had to spend the funds or refund. It's now 10 years. And so that was updated, although the council, if there are certain circumstances, can I believe it's through ordinance, can extend that 10 years beyond. But right now that's not been a problem. We've got enough projects going on that the money's going out pretty quick. So it really hasn't been an issue, but we have it reflecting what the state law allows us to do. And then there was a bunch of other administrative provisions that got updated as well. All Right. And one other thing I wanted to note, because if you do decide to go with option B or if you some alternative, so the current ordinance in this draft form in there is option A. If you do decide to go with option B with a higher fee, I had an example that helped try to explain how this, when you did the addition onto the house, what I was mentioning earlier, how this would work going from one tier to the next tier. There was an example in there. And so it wouldn't make sense if the council adopts option B for the fees, but still had, for the example, the old numbers. So we would also need to update that as part of the ordinance when before that gets signed. But I just wanted to note that this also would be a change made in there if you do decide to go with option B as well. This isn't of any substance. This is just informative for folks to understand and staff to understand how that tiered system works with an addition onto a house. Does that make sense? And I believe that's all I've got. Happy to answer any other questions you might have. This is the proposed motion that's both in your staff report and up there.
Thank you. Questions?
I move to pass first reading, waive second reading, and adopt ordinance number 811, repealing and readopting Chapter 3.36 of the Woodinville Municipal Code regarding park impact fees with the fees in option B revised.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Would the maker of the motion care to discuss?
I was actually wondering if we would get approval. I know that we had to have things readjusted, and this offers an opportunity for us to adjust and make sure everything gets readjusted based on the new calculations. I did have questions about how things will went with that contractor, but that's something that I'll take up offline. Overall, I think that this will be something fair. We know how difficult it is to get new taxes across the line and make sure that they fit, and this will be something that will give us some longevity. That's all.
Councilmember Evans.
I appreciate that this has reduced the non-resident taxes. I think that that's a fair thing to do in support of our business community. I also like the option of having up to 80% for affordable housing. I think that goes a long way to support that initiative for the city as well. We have a lot of park initiatives, a lot of trail initiatives, a lot of requests. I know at the concert series at the park over the summer, I talked to many, many people about the potential from getting down off the West Ridge and the two options that we had. And there are hundreds of people that are very excited about that option that I talk to. I know other council members talk to more people as well. Just the opportunity to give our residents a way to get in and around this city in ways other than a car is really important, and it's going to take funding. And we know that that is going to activate our community in getting out and about walking, enjoying our parks, enjoying our trails, but also getting off of the parks and trails and going to our businesses, because you experience the community in a whole different way when you get out into our public spaces. So for that reason, I'm definitely supportive of this.
Any other comments? I will say that, at our July 7th meeting, I was quite happy with option A. I think option B does allow us to capture a little bit more revenue for our parks projects, and it doesn't unnecessarily impact the smaller homes as much as the larger square footage buildings that we might be seeing on this fee schedule. So I feel comfortable with it, I guess I could say. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that at the moment. So seeing no further comments, we'll just do a voice vote on this one. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. All right. Business item number 13, first reading of ordinance 813 regarding 2026 annual comprehensive plan amendment.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Almgren, the planning manager. I don't get to come see you guys as often as I see the planning commission, so figured I should introduce myself. So this is the 2026 annual comprehensive plan amendment docket. And so just by way of explanation, there are a handful of other times that you can make amendments to the comprehensive plan. One, we always do it during the CIP, the capital improvement project process. We always do it as well during the school district's adoption of their plan, that process. But other than the exemptions that are laid out in state law, we are only supposed to amend it once a year. And so it's important that we get all of those together in a docket and consider them all as one item, because the comp plan, you shouldn't be like piecemealing it a million times a year. It's supposed to be a document that you're thinking about how it's going to impact everything as a whole. And so the amendment process typically starts with a call for amendment or docket items or amendment items in late summer. That's due the end of September. And then in January, we start reviewing them, take them to the Planning Commission. Depending on the items, sometimes we get some initial feedback from the council if it's something that your group is interested in supporting or not supporting, depending on what it is. February and March this year were reports to the Planning Commission to review the items and discuss them. There was a public hearing in July, just 2 weeks ago. And then also at that same meeting, the Planning Commission recommended or made a recommendation to City Council, and in August we are here in front of City Council. So that's the big picture process. This year we received 3 items, 2 of which were initiated by the city and 1 of which was initiated by a member of the public. So we'll go through each of these in a little bit of detail. The first one is a text amendment in support of the Bee City USA designation. So this was a city-initiated amendment in support of Resolution 664, which was done last summer on July 8th in support of the city being a Bee City USA. And so just to support that designation, we're going back and putting something now in the comp plan to acknowledge the commitment of the city to the being a Bee City designation, and just talking about the programs and policies supported in that. And that will be in the natural environment chapter of the comprehensive plan. This is the second item we received. It's a land use map amendment. So this is the one that is initiated by a citizen. And so for ones that are initiated by a citizen, we can't make changes to them unless the applicant agrees to the changes. This is also the item that we had the most interest in. So at the public hearing, we received 1 written comment and 3 verbal comments. All of the comments were concerns about development potential, density, and traffic and construction impacts. So I'm going to talk about this one a little bit more. So this is 1 vacant parcel. It's about 0.8 acres. The current future land use map designation is the Central Business District, and the applicant has requested that it be changed to residential medium. which is corresponds to R18 and R12 in our zoning code, with the stated intent of building townhomes. Of course, they aren't actually held to that, so they can build anything that's allowed for in those zones, but it is much more narrow than the central business district. And I've got a little vicinity map where I just highlighted. It's the property that's across Woodinville Redmond Road from the cut shop, if that helps everybody kind of orient themselves. Oh, and I have a big vicinity map, but it's kind of zoomed out. Other notable features on the site include a unnamed stream, to the southwest of the property that has a stream buffer. At this time, because of changes to our critical areas code, the applicant or the property owner will need to get a new critical areas study done. So we don't know exactly what that stream buffer is going to look like, but likely it's going to be at least 100 feet. So it's going to take up probably about a third of the property. And this also just kind of gives you an idea of what surrounds it, which is townhomes, cluster single family, which are just single family homes that are on smaller lots. So they're much closer together. It was actually a planned unit development that was approved while it was still in King County. So they're much denser than some of our more traditional single family neighborhoods. And then you've got larger pieces of property and open space. We actually are coming back around to allowing for more of those now. And then you've got an office building, and then, like I said, the cut shops there. And then just to give you an idea, currently as it's zoned, it's the central business district doesn't actually have like a minimum or a maximum density, but based on other projects, we have seen an average about 60 dwelling units per acre. And so if we apply that to the property, 0.8 acres, that's 48 units. The sites tend to be constrained by height restrictions, maximum residential floor area, ratio allowances, minimum landscaping coverage, and other design requirements. And then again, the stream buffer is going to impact that further. So in either scenario, it'd probably come down further. If it were to be rezoned to R18, that's 15 units on the site and probably a little bit less. With the one caveat that now with the middle housing, we do allow for up to 3 units per lot. So if they were to subdivide every single lot that they could, and then do 2 ADUs on each one, they could get up to 3 units per lot, which would be 43 units. I think looking at the site practically, that there's probably not real space for that, but there is that potential. And then that was all the slides I had on that one. And then the final item we received was also a city-initiated text amendment to support the city's inclusionary zoning code that we are in the middle of working through Planning Commission right now. And so these would be some additional policy, or I guess rewriting policy H10.1 and then adding A, B, and C under it to really support the mandatory inclusionary zoning goals and policies. And then just as a summary of the public participation, we mailed a notice to property owners within 500 feet of that property that's being requested for a rezone or future land use map amendment on April 29th with just an explanation letter of what's going on and contact information so they could contact me if they had any questions. And then we mailed them again and posted on the site the notice of the hearing in July. SEPA notice was sent to local agencies and was put in the newspaper, and then also the hearing was noticed in the newspaper and posted in our locations that we require, the post office, city hall, and I guess just on the site. And then we also got a notice of the hearing in our newsletter that got mailed to everybody, the summer newsletter. And so we got the word out that way. And like I said, we only had 3 people comment at the hearing and 1 person sent a letter in. And that's all I had for you tonight. I'm happy to take any questions. I also have some motions up here. They're in your packet as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, this property previously had a development agreement for a hotel on it. Is that correct?
It was not a development agreement, but they had gone through the land use approvals and had almost had an approved building permit for a hotel.
So if we were to do this rezone, then that effectively would go away.
Yes, so those permits have all expired anyway, so if they did come back in at this point, they'd be starting over anyway, but correct. If this rezone was done, hotels are not allowed in this zone anyway, so.
Okay, yeah, it's just something, some people were concerned that it was in addition to that and that it would overload, and so I just wanted to make sure that we clarified this would replace it, and those permits, as you said, have expired.
Correct, yes, this is instead of, not in addition to.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could walk through some of the differences in the land use from going from CBD to this medium density residential. So when you look at the number of potential units on the lot, they seem similar. But as you move from CBD to residential, you eliminate any possibility for commercial space there. What other changes go along with that differentiation between CBD and a residential land use?
We don't allow multifamily in the apartment sense that you're picturing in the R18 zone, although I think Robert's double checking that just to make sure. As you mentioned, commercial uses aren't really allowed with the exception of a home-based business. You can work as an accountant or something like that out of your home, but nothing that is thought of as commercial, like retail or restaurants and things like that. Trying to think of what else other than it is generally just going to be much more residential, what's going to be permitted on that property if it goes to R18. Do you have more to add, Robert?
Yeah, I was just noting, I'm just pulling up the residential table. So other than the CBD doesn't allow single-family duplexes, and the R18 does, but otherwise they're pretty similar in terms of what they allow for residential. So they'll allow apartments, they'll allow townhouses. The big difference being, though, in the CBD, we use a floor area ratio, as Amanda mentioned, which doesn't have a density. It's just you're cutting up a certain amount of pie that you have, where the other one, it's based on units, and then we also have minimum landscaping requirements and stuff. So even where you see this thing, if they subdivided, we were actually doing the numbers on that to see what that actually might look like. And I think if they did townhouses, I don't even know if they make 1,000 square feet. I'm not even sure if they're even that big. The land's pretty constrained, particularly with the stream buffer on it. It's going to really put a major constraint, because that was also something they lost when the permits expired. The old urban stream designation that they had approved expired, and so they're now subject to the new requirements, which actually extend their buffer even further into the property, making it even more difficult to develop.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what the difference is for us as a city of changing this over from a CBD zoning to a residential zoning, given that, you know, the number of housing units might be similar, but also by changing it to residential, we're allowing those single-family homes in an area on a parcel that would not currently allow single-family homes.
Yeah, so one other real big difference between the R18 and the CBD, CBD doesn't allow residential on the ground floor without a development agreement. So if they want to do townhouses, you're going to be doing a development agreement in a CBD zone for about 16 or 17 units. Versus if you're in the R18 zone, you would not require the development agreement because you can have ground floor residential. So from a practical standpoint for them, that's a big difference. Much easier process to get the housing in there without a development agreement. So that would be one of the, I think, their incentives. But for the neighborhood in R18, further protects because it's residentially surrounded except for the one side, and the zoning actually matches more in line with what else is already in that area.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we have a full picture of what the change would entail.
Yeah, and I did want to just be clear that they could potentially get extra units because of the ADUs and middle housing, but the 15 units is far more likely. So just.
Councilmember Millman.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in favor of changing this to residential, and a lot of it is, it's already been stated, in that area we have challenges. One of the biggest challenges, and we've talked about this before on this council, is that intersection is a problem for us, and that the hotel that was originally planned, part of their business model was to go after Bothell businesses, to cater to Bothell businesses, and and at that time I'd stress that intersection even more, benefiting Bothell businesses, which isn't our priority. So I'm in favor of the townhomes in the sense that that's pretty much what is surrounding them, except for that office park. I mean, it fits right in with what is already there. The average daily trips to that intersection will be minimal. Will have a minimal impact into the area, and it fits much better into what's already there. So for the lesser impact, I think this is the best use of that property. There's less impact on one of our most problematic intersections, and it fits much better in with what's already there. So I'm in favor of that.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I definitely hear council member on that particular item, but just to be clear, there hasn't been any request for permits entered. This is just a request for us to change the zoning.
Correct, yes. They, I think, initially talked to us about doing townhomes there, and we informed them that the process would be either a development agreement, which they didn't want to do for such a small project, or to do this. So this is the process they've pursued first.
Any further questions from council? All right, seeing none, we have
I move to approve an amendment to the comprehensive plan to add a new policy to the natural environment regarding Woodinville's B city use designation as presented.
Second.
motion and second. Care to speak to this?
I love this. Let's continue.
Any further comment on this one? Seeing none, will all in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
I move to approve an amendment to the comprehensive plan future land use map, changing parcel number 926059153 from central business district designation to residential medium designation.
Second.
Motion and second. Care to speak to this one?
I don't see any danger in making this change. Imagine we'll see what they really want to do with the property after we move forward. But yeah, I don't think there's any detriment, as Councilmember Millman pointed out. This will actually be a good use of that land.
Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
I move to approve an amendment to policy H10.1 of the Woodinville Comprehensive Plan to specify mandatory inclusionary zoning as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Care to speak, anyone? No? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
I move to pass first reading of ordinance number 813 regarding the 2026 docket of comprehensive plan amendments as presented.
Second.
Care to speak on this motion? Thanks for thinking about it. Any further comments on this? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. We have amended our comp plan. We will now move to business item 14 with ordinance number 814, establishing parking restrictions on certain city streets.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. A brief presentation on all of our favorite topic this evening is parking, of course. As we prepare for this discussion, please note that I did distribute a paper copy of an updated draft of the ordinance 814 for council member consideration this evening and reference this evening. I'll go through a couple of those changes that are captured in there as we go through the presentation. Okay, downtown tourist parking district conversation. Okay, we've covered many of these slides and this information already, but just as a quick recap, the authority and existing framework for our parking within the city of Woodinville. State law allows cities to regulate parking per the RCWs. City framework is captured in that model, is essentially a model traffic ordinance captured in WMC Chapter 10.3. Effectively, parking is allowed unless restricted, so that's kind of the framework that you'll see this evening in the draft ordinance. Existing restrictions, there are numerous restrictions captured in the existing code. Primarily, those are focused around the areas around the different schools, specifically the high school, and there are some restrictions in some of our industrial areas around heavy vehicles and time limits for those vehicles. Right now, the current penalty, at least the base penalty in the city, that's piled on by other fees not subject to the city's jurisdiction, but the base fee for penalties from the city right now is $26. Okay. Background, council has discussed this several times, and parking in general many, many times, but specifically in downtown, started that conversation April 21st, continued that conversation July 7th. At that first meeting and somewhat in the second meeting, the conversation centered around implementing duration restrictions for city-controlled street parking. You'll recall that there was some conversation about other downtown parking that appears to be public street parking. It is accessible to the public, but is on private property, and we have the inability to regulate those parking, at least with our current easement language that we have for those private property owners. I can certainly answer questions, but I think council is familiar with that concept. Edits, and this is where some of these corrections start coming in for your draft ordinance before you this evening. I errantly didn't capture the motion that was made and approved on the July 7th meeting, which was simply to implement 3-hour parking in the city-controlled parking in the downtown area. So, and I'll point that out here as we get into the ordinance, but the ordinance, the revised version that you have before you on page 4 of that ordinance, 4 of 4, you can see where I've highlighted and struck out the reference to the between the hours of 8 to 8 on the subject areas that are being proposed for addition to this parking restrictions. Again, that I had captured that the simplicity of the motion was to simply implement 3-hour parking. There was no between hours or just daylight hours. So the 8 to 8 was inappropriate to have in that ordinance. So I'm proposing striking that based on that previous council direction. All right. Looking at the map here, and it's a little hard to see obviously on the screen, but the proposed changes captured in this ordinance before you focuses on 4 specific streets, 3 of them in our downtown area and 1 of them in our tourist district along the south end of the New Harvest Project. You see the upper left picture there captures the 3 areas along 132nd, 133rd, and 135th. Those areas, I think it's hard to tell, but highlighted in the kind of neon green color are those public parking stalls subject to our jurisdiction and control that this ordinance would propose to restrict the hours of parking on, or the duration of parking on. It does not apply to those areas, for example, in the Wooden Creek Village development. And those are, again, those publicly accessible parking spaces, but located on private property. And the language of the easement that between the city and that developer does not allow us to implement restrictions or enforce those restrictions on those private property parking areas. So this ordinance again applies to just those 3.
Mr. City Manager, we have a question.
Sure.
Councilmember Millman.
Thank you. A couple things. One, would this apply to the new Midtown, the public streets being developed in the Midtown development?
Not as drafted. That could be a subsequent, depending on exactly how that parking is provided, that could be a subsequent amendment to this portion of the code.
Okay, so the motion was 3-hour parking in city streets that we controlled. Like that would not apply over to the Midtown?
This gets back to the structure where parking is allowed unless there's specific restrictions in place. And our code has captured those, and that's the long list that you see in that ordinance, where we're proposing to add some areas that's restricted. So that would require kind of a restructuring of how we approach this with the code. Right now, basically parking is allowed by default unless we've provided otherwise. And so we have the long list of where we've provided otherwise. We'd have to amend that approach, I think. And I'd have to discuss that with Mr. Ganson to have it kind of unilaterally apply to all the downtown streets.
My concern in Midtown is one of the problems we have is when a property owner, a private property owner is charging, and I repeat, I think it was not a bad direction to give public parking easement in private property, and it's kind of biting us right now when it should be the benefit for the public that we serve. But I think that if we don't address the Midtown area, I think we're going to run into some of the same problems that we're having in some of the other downtown areas, because they're going to be charging for parking in their structures, and people will be motivated to take up public parking on the streets, and we'll just have the same problem. So I'm hoping that we could just extend that into that area as well.
And we could do that, presumably we could do that by adding reference, as we do with these 4 proposed streets. Right now, we could add additional ones to what we believe are going to be those public streets now, or we could do it once we have those public streets and public parking areas, I'll say more well-defined once the plan and the permitting is worked through. Because right now, that we have the concept for that development in the development agreement, but those roads in that site plan can change. So to me, it's safer if we wait till we know exactly where those roads in the public places are going to be, and then we can define those by adding those to the code. But certainly we can try to preemptively do that now if council wants to do that.
Well, I guess I'd rely on your expertise on that. I mean, we're dealing with it now. Could we just note public streets, future public streets in the downtown? This would apply to? Is something as simple along those lines, would that suffice? Or
I think I'd have to work that through with Mr. Ganson. I think we've had to think through still having to define what that downtown would encompass, because I know even in this conversation we've talked about, as we've gone through these deliberations, this is trying to address parking in downtown. But even after this, I know there was a comment from a local resident that, well, what about my parking along 140th, kind of the north end of downtown, depending on how you define downtown, even though that's been outside of our area that we've discussed as downtown. So
Well, I think one of the reasons why I made it, that my motion was simple on, and I said something to the effect of city streets that we can control. I mean, I didn't really designate downtown. I know that's what we talked about, hoping one of the areas that we improve, but I didn't limit it to downtown. It's just one of the areas that we talked about. Anyway, yeah, I'll rely on your guidance for this. I'm just trying to head off what I think is going to be just another problem when they start that project too. So
I don't disagree. I think we'll have to, if council is interested in pursuing that, we can certainly make that amendment via this same type of action. I think, council member, if you're broadly, as I'm understanding the motion, broadly applying it to city streets that the city controls, and specifically not talking about downtown, then we're talking about a whole different ball of wax with our approach to code. Because right now, like I said, it's by default, you can, unless we've said you can't. If we're saying that, I mean, that would then apply to every public street in the city, unless we define that area that it applies to.
Okay, so right now, what we're tackling is what, CBD and the TI type of thing, or what? Because you mentioned one over in Harvest, and we mentioned
specifically it applies to the four that are shown on the map. So the 132nd, 133rd, 135th, and then 143rd. Too many numbers in there. 143rd, which is along the south end of the Harvest project.
Okay, well, I'll cede my time, but I think we're going to have to wind up at least put a pin in this and tackle it when the appropriate time comes.
Councilmember Edwards.
So I actually want to build on that. And if there is a chance to add it now or as soon as possible, I think I would prefer that personally as well, to give people notice. If our intention is to do that down the road, being able to put that on notice that that is going to be one of the ones that are going to be the 3-hour limit in Midtown area, I would agree with Councilmember Millman that this is something we should do now, as opposed to wait till what we do now may end up not valid because, like you said, there may be some restrictions there. But at least what was put on notice too, that is going to be one of our 3-hour spots whenever that may be.
And again, I don't disagree. I think if council wants to pursue that direction, we can certainly bring that back as part of our second reading on this. And I think with that understanding that it may have to change in the future as those roads are further and more clearly defined. I think we can say, based on the site plan as we know it in the development agreement, say that we can at least attempt right now to define those grid roads by name and say that those areas would be subject to this, and then we might have to fine tune in the future. Yeah.
Other comments, questions from council?
I move the City Council pass first reading of ordinance number 814 as amended.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I might have one more thing for you guys to discuss before we get to that, though.
Oh, all right.
All right. Okay, I mentioned this slide here where we took out the 8 to 8 because that wasn't in conformance with the motion. The other piece that I wanted to raise for discussion and possible council action discussion is around that fine. Right now, again, that's $26. The language that was in your draft ordinance in your packets errantly omitted that last highlighted section there where that's currently in code. It just, for whatever reason, in the copy and paste didn't make it over there. So that the draft ordinance that you have, the revised version there for you, has that $26 line item added back in there. The question I did want to raise with council is that $26 is not much, and it's also not in line with many of our neighboring jurisdictions, which, as I note on the slide there, is more typically in the $50 to $70 range if you go look at the bail schedule today for the same infraction. So that's a question for council to discuss and perhaps not take any action on, but I wanted to at least raise that question. Under the kind of consideration of at $26, you can get several parking tickets and probably still be money ahead from paying parking at a local garage. So perhaps that warrants conversation and addressing. That's my presentation. Apologize, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Wanted to make sure that was part of the conversation.
Mr. City Manager, I appreciate that you keeping us in line here. and reminding us to speak about this issue. I know from my perspective, I think putting in some language to indicate the future streets that will come in Midtown sounds like a reasonable request, even if we do have to go in and edit as that plan actually is solidified, just so that we are clear about the intent of what we're trying to do. And I would say for the issue of the charge, the penalty, I do believe $26 is not enough to deter people from parking there, especially as people are calculating what are my odds of having parking enforcement today. I think we do need to have a heftier fine attached to this to really see change there. And so I would be fully supportive of the higher end of that fee structure. Deputy Mayor.
Absolutely in favor of upgrading this fine, largely for the reasons that the mayor mentioned. But if we're also thinking of it in terms of enforcement, it will take us more than $26 to actually cover the enforcement action. I would propose to take that to at least 1 hour of an enforcement officer's time, just to kind of counterbalance that and make it align with something that's tangible.
Councilmember Evans.
Is there any way for somebody to go through Kirkland Community Court or something to protest
not
their
the parking?
ticket?
And Chief had other commitments he had to step away from, so I'd have to ask him. I'm sure there is. I just don't know the details on it.
What I'm wondering is this going to put a lot of burden on staff, or is it something that we can plug into a current program that we have? And if so, should we take into account what that cost may be as well? To the previous points, let's make sure that this isn't costing us a lot of money to do this enforcement. So just something to think about. Thank you.
Councilmember Millman.
Do we know when that $26 was first implemented? Is it like one of these things that happened in 1993 when we
were? It's a fair question. We were trying to track the history of it, and I don't have a conclusive answer for you. I know this specific language as drafted showed up in 2018, but there's obviously been parking fines. I just didn't have the opportunity to trace that back and figure out when that $26 was first arrived at, but it wouldn't surprise me that that's been a holdover for quite a long while.
I would pay 5 tickets and I'd still be money ahead, so just saying. So yeah, I'm in favor. We should make it to a number, not intentionally trying to really negatively affect people, but we are trying to affect change and behavior, so it's got to be a number that actually does that. So, yeah.
I can propose, if it works for council, I can propose a number and somewhere in that $50 to $70 range. I'll talk with staff about that when I come back for a second reading at your next conversation.
Thank you. So I'm hearing pretty strong agreement on increasing that number, and certainly with keeping it somewhat in line with our neighboring jurisdictions, but making sure it's enough to recover our costs and act as an actual deterrent. And then I think that I've also heard some general agreement about an amendment on the second reading for those future streets of some sort. All right.
Now, I move that the City Council pass first reading of ordinance number 814 as amended.
Second.
A motion and a second. Would you care to speak?
I think you gave a good digest of it, Madam Mayor. We're fairly in agreement with both items, and this will help with parking. I know that this has been something we've talked about multiple times to make sure that people are moving and allowing for additional parking throughout the city for our business community. And this will help bring that to fruition.
I will just say that I think there's good understanding on the dais that this alone is not going to solve any massive parking problems in the city, that this is one tool that we will try to get vehicles moving out of spaces where they've been sitting for long periods of time. And I think we are all aware that additional actions are going to be necessary to make bigger changes in the way parking happens in our city, but this is one step we're taking to help address what we can at this point, and while we're pursuing additional actions in other areas. All right, seeing no further comments this evening, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. And we are on to public comments this evening. No one has signed up for this comment period. Report of the city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. Obviously, we have our Celebrate Woodinville coming up this weekend, and I know Mr. Herzog has spoke with several of you. If he hasn't already, speak with them before the end of the meeting about whether you're going to be able to participate in the city's parade float on Saturday. That would be fantastic. And it is on the agenda. If needed, I would request a 20-minute executive session for litigation matters this evening if council sees fit. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We now have reports of council members. Councilmember Evans.
Yeah, last Friday, the Regional Advisory Committee for East Rail Trail met down in Jean Coulon Park in Renton. We got to, it's the end point for East Rail, and it also is they have a fantastic plan for connecting to many other regional trails down there. So much like what we're looking at going up into Snohomish County, they're also looking at how they can open up to other trails. So it was really great to see everybody and to see the unique challenges that they're facing down there, and also to get excited about the future of trails all over King County. That's it.
Councilmember Edwards.
No report, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, this was something that came up recently as people began to ask about the fires that are happening in eastern Washington. And they brought up the idea that Woodinville just happens to be a well-forested urban area. First and foremost, let's keep those people who are suffering from those fires top of mind, and imagine if they need anything in any level of support. I hope we are doing that. But secondarily, as a well-forested urban area ourselves, something we will want to do is give some consideration and thought to our emergency management plan. I don't know if it's come up recently, but it's something to put on the docket to review.
Thank you. I think that's an important, an important point to make. And so thank you. Obviously, emergency management always something that we're kind of thinking through, maybe not specifically to wildland fire, but obviously kind of more broadly. I know to that end, and I'll give her a shout out, our intern has one of her many things that she's helped out with this summer already. Recently, if you were at one of the Celebrate Woodinville concerts, we were handing out the little postcards about emergency preparedness, and here's the 9 items you need to have in your go bag and ready to go, and the essentials kind of stuff. So maybe not specific to wildfires, but obviously very applicable as we get into those emergency preparedness conversations broadly. So thank you. It's always a good reminder to our community to be thinking about that.
Councilmember Wise.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Councilmember Millman.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. That was part of what I was going to say, but we have sent firefighters from Eastside Fire over there fighting, and from experience, I know that's a real hard and thankless task. They're over there working in a lot of smoke and heat, and it's a problem. And we're a tree city. I think that's great that we're a tree city, and but that does create a problem as things are getting hotter, and these wildfires are creating more of a problem. So being tree city is great. 365 or 4 days out of the year, but that one day it might not be as great. So we definitely need to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I will first just start off by acknowledging that tonight is National Night Out, and I know that we are not out necessarily, but I know that our police chief has been engaging with the community more on ways that we could bring that celebration here in the city, despite the fact that we are typically in council for that event.
I will just address, because I know the question came up, the helicopter earlier was related to that, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, put some minds at ease there.
I also wanted to send out some love and empathy to my fellow West Ridge residents right now. It is pretty rough up there. We, in all of our wisdom, have decided to do all of the construction right now, and so have the cities of Bothell and Kirkland. So every single route in and out of the West Ridge is currently down to one lane with flaggers. And at every intersection, there is a significant backup. You cannot get on or off of the West Ridge during the daytime right now. And so for our residents, mea culpa, I'm sorry, and also it's clear that there's significant infrastructure investment needed up there, and hopefully as construction season winds down, all of these projects will wrap up prior to school starting in the next month. And that's all I had to say this evening. We will now move to an executive session. We have 20 minutes. It will be a closed session to discuss legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, or to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in official capacity is or is likely to become a party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. Thank you. No formal action is expected to be taken. Get my papers.
You know, I realized too that happened. This ordinance got changed in the first year here. I was actually there when all this happened. I don't know where it will go.
We'll see. But that's easy with manufacturing. Just he comes in matter. I mean, I don't know how they do it. This I know. I don't either. I swear to God, I have no idea. These kids are good. They do it. And even Bible markets, we were. And did it send it? Brother sending his crackers, sending in the daycare. Some error is bad. We'll find out. No, absolutely. No, that's. We can benefit one of the things. Typically, I would love to. You could, and I'm not going to be my role. I would learn. You should your fair share. When I can specifically help say, absolutely not. I will being there at the school. I learned all the time.
Their floor. Their floor. This is what he said. You're gonna have fun with this. Yeah. Always try. Yeah, I was kind of wondering what all that was, and then other places, the way they tell you. So this thing goes up over here, right? Certain things, yeah, you don't ask questions, you don't ask, and you don't do it, you don't ask, and nothing will happen. Then I came here, our professor here, in the school, he says, get off of it. I'm disliked, but. He said, you know what? Always, when you solve a problem, you kill it, you go at it. You kill it, get the best to work on it. That's what I'm trying to do. And you said it very well. That's the common sense, the way you said it. Thank you, Robert. You're a real team player. Sure. Don't mind me. We didn't need to put other chairs up to us tonight. Other reasons to be excited this way. They're going to handle it. I just wanted to make sure that you understand. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We're back. No action was taken. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Meeting is now adjourned.